everyone, to Losers Bracket Round 6 for Season 3 of the Invitational of Season 3 of the Eternal Tournament Series. I am Bairdrus, and once again joined by my wonderful co-host, LightsOutAce. And we are going to get into our first matchup of Losers Bracket Round 6 in just a moment, with Unearthly on Rakano Plate versus Hydar on Big Combry.
Yeah, and you know who these guys are. You've seen them already today. You've seen them on the ladder. You've seen them on Reddit and streams. These are good players. They have good decks, and we'll see where the match takes us.
Yeah, and you know, after Unearthly winning earlier against Big Combry, I still have to give him the edge in this matchup and say that it is quite likely he will take down Hydar. Well, I wouldn't say quite likely, but I'll give him a 5 or 10% edge. What would you say, Ace?
Yeah, I would definitely say that Unearthly is favored. He built his deck to beat Combray, and he's been beating Combray all weekend. So there's no reason to think it's going to stop here.
Yeah, he is a man with a mission, and that mission is to make Rakano great again. So he is going to try and destroy the Big Combry players here, and we'll see if he can do it once again as we jump right into our first matchup. Hydar on the play for this one. Definitely going to have to take a redraw himself, holding only a 1 power. Unearthly with a little bit of an interesting decision here, and does elect to keep this with the Tinker Overseer playable on turn 2.
If he finds any power, then he has some Crown Watch Cavalries to pump it, and a fire gives him a Deep Forge Plate. The only thing that's really wrong with Unearthly's hand is that we still don't have premium sigils yet.
Yeah, really. Like, the rest of his deck is so shiny and so beautiful, but the sigils are where he is lacking the most. Hydar running into power issues right out of the gate. Going to need to top deck 2 power in a row here to put himself in a really good position. And Temple Scribe uncastable since he needs double time influence. In the meantime, we're going to see the Tinker Overseer start pushing in, and Hydar is going to have to decide whether or not to play this Desert Marshal. And we do see him elect to sacrifice his Desert Marshal, and we'll see Unearthly just go ahead and reload with another Tinker Overseer.
Yeah, and I like just trading cards when you don't have anything else in your hand that you can play. Like, you just want to drag the game out as long as possible so that you can draw that 3rd and 4th power.
Yeah, and Unearthly making a decision here. I mean, he saw his opponent stumble on power for at least a single turn now, so deciding to drop this Crown Watch Cavalry and buff the Tinker Overseer and start punishing his opponent. And Hydar does have the Vanquish to kind of respond to this play, but Unearthly in a position now where he can establish this Silverwing Familiar fairly comfortably and put this Deep Forge Plate on it next turn. And Hydar still needs to find power, and finally finds power, although no influence to go with it. So kind of like a backhanded power, if you will.
Yeah, and Unearthly knows that Hydar doesn't have Scorpion Wasp, so there's no danger to slapping this plate on and just crashing in for looks like the game.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Hydar is going to have any way out of this. Crown Watch Cavalry very likely to come down and buff up this Silverwing Familiar, and they're just going to be pushing in for damage. And yeah, Hydar just has no chance of winning this, unfortunately, now. There's no way he'll be able to deal with all 4 of these units on 3 power. He would need to have found 2 power and be able to play both of them to actually harsh rule his way. And even in that case, the Silverwing Familiar will still seal the deal. So Unearthly taking a very, very quick game 1. Not too surprising there. We haven't seen Rakano really get off to too many great running starts, but certainly when your opponent is lacking on power, it is easy to do.
Yeah, and just kind of taunting him. He draws the 4th power in the turn he's already dead. Needed that a little bit earlier. So we'll move on to sideboard now, where Hydar's matchup actually does improve. Because as you said before, Unearthly is basically pre-boarded for Combray, whereas Hydar gets to add in a bunch of decays and Scorpion Wasps and such things.
Yeah, he'll definitely want to be bringing in the extra Vanquish, the decays. It's possible we'll see the Dawnwalkers as an inclusion here. We definitely saw Hydar bring in the Dawnwalkers against Visarius to try and stall out the ground. So I have a feeling we may see that strategy come back, although initially looking at his board, it looks like they aren't in. He is just bringing in a pair of decays and an extra Scorpion Wasp, as well as his 4th Vanquish. So yeah, just a few minor changes here and there to try and make the matchup a little more bearable on his end.
Yeah, and if Comrade doesn't stumble on power in the early game, it really can keep up with the size of Rakano's units, even with weapons attached to them, pretty easily by setting up good double blocks.
Yeah, and Unearthly, on the other hand, I mean, let's take a look at his sideboard. Like, really, what can you bring in here? Like, the Silverwing Familiar, maybe? Finest Hour? That's it? Like, you really don't have a lot from Unearthly's side that you're looking to bring in here. I also love that Unearthly's deck is called In Plate We Trust. That's definitely been the story of his tournament, it looks like, so far. Deforged Plate putting in absolute, just tremendous amount of work for Unearthly. Really has been one of those cards that's been locking up these games for him.
And Plate We Trust has actually been kind of the story of Unearthly's career in Eternal so far.
Yeah, it really has been, though. And we see Hythar with a pretty good opening start, like all things considered. It's not fantastic. He doesn't really have anything good to build into, but he at least does have some answers he can hopefully cobble together to deal with these early units. Desert Marshal playable right here if he elects to go ahead and silence this down to a 1-1. And he will go ahead and take this opportunity to abuse that. And Sandstorm Titan picked up very, very nice for Hythar. Those are the type of cards he's going to be looking towards in this matchup.
So somewhat awkwardly, Hythar doesn't have another silence for this E-Gene if Unearthly decides to drop her into play right here.
Yeah, although he does have the Decay, which I'm assuming Hythar will be able to abuse on the next turn, assuming Unearthly is going to drop this armor onto the Champion of Glory and try and attack in. He'll be able to cobbled together a nice little play here with the Decay, although it looks like he's willing to just wait one turn and
the armor won't make the Champion of Glory big enough to attack into the Titan this turn.
Yeah, it certainly will not, and holding the Decay up for next turn is going to be just as devastating if Unearthly decides to use aReNGee to take care, or buff up, rather, his Champion of Glory. We see Hythar already getting in for some early damage with the Sandstorm Titan. So we'll see if this is a blowout. And, oh, yeah, this is going to be absolutely devastating here. Unearthly going to attack here.
2 full turns from Unearthly. Like, he spent 8 power pumping up this champion and then getting it destroyed by a single Decay. I think that the tempo swing here is just going to be too much, and Hythar is going to be able to beat down with the Sandstorm Titan and win the game.
Yeah, I absolutely think he will as well. Unearthly not being able to establish another threat this turn puts him so far behind in this matchup. Meanwhile, Hythar is just chipping. I mean, chipping is a bad word. Just punching away at Unearthly's life total. I mean, he's just absolutely dismantling him right now. And I mean, Unearthly is able to establish at least a 6/6 to block with for the time being. But we see Hythar has Vanquish in hand that's just going to clean this up and allow him to punch another 10 damage, and that just is the game. I cannot fathom what Unearthly can do here to actually win this matchup. Certainly, once Hythar puts another unit on the board, Unearthly is just too far behind and does throw the immediate concession after seeing his top deck.
Yeah, that was like a recurring nightmare-esque blowout. Your opponent spends several mid-game turns pumping up a unit instead of developing their board. And then when they get that unit answered cheaply, you can never catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just too much for Unearthly. That Decay was too big of a tempo swing, as you pointed out. So players comfortable with their sideboards going to jump straight back into game 3. And Hythar with a pretty good hand out of the gate. I mean, Vanquish to take care of anything too big and nasty, and Sandstorm Titan and Reality Warden to follow it up with to be able to block. That being said,
no plays until turn 4 on the draw means you are going to take a lot of damage.
Yeah, you certainly are. Although if Unearthly does choose to drop this Shogun Scepter here, which I imagine he will, we will see this vanquished on the following turn, which will create a gap for him to have a little bit of breathing room. And also the Oni Ronin matches up very poorly against the Sandstorm Titan with the Crown Watch Cavalry buffs in the coming turns. So I got to give this one to Hythar out of the gate, although that Valkyrie Enforcer was a very big pickup.
Yeah, the Vulcan Enforcer will be able to silence something. I actually don't know. The bodies are what's important from Hythar's units at this point.
Well, actually, the line I'm looking at right now is that this Valkyrie Enforcer is going to be able to silence the Sandstorm Titan and create a 4-turn clock for Unearthly in the air. Unearthly also can go about the route he's looking at currently of buffing the Oni Ronin and then trying to force in 2 additional damage here, essentially saying you're either going to take 6 or you're going to be able to trade off the unit but still take 2. And this does put Hythar in a position where he is very inclined to trade the Sandstorm Titan into the Oni Ronin, even though it's not what he really wants to do. And we actually do see
6 because Unearthly doesn't have burn in his deck. So he knows that he's safe as long as he can stabilize the ground with this Reality Warden and Sandstorm Titan.
That's what I'm thinking is actually going to be his downfall, though, is, yeah, we see a Vanquish picked up, which is very, very nice here. But on top of that, I mean, we'll see the exact same attack we saw last turn, and now Unearthly or Hythar is going to be under the gun to trade this Oni Run.
Yeah, he's actually going to go down to 8 and have that 2-turn clock from Valkyrie Enforcer that you were talking about a couple turns ago.
Yeah, and this is where Valkyrie Enforcer really is going to pay off. I mean, assuming Hythar doesn't find a Vanquish or a Sandstorm Titan, even with the Combri Healer coming down and presenting a little bit of life gain back, I mean, Unearthly will still have him on a 3-turn clock. Ooh, or Champion of Glory. Wow, what a nasty Champion of Glory with all those Warcry buffs.
Yeah, I'm surprised Unearthly didn't commit this Valkyrie Enforcer last turn. I guess he didn't want to get harsh ruled and not have anything to follow up with.
There's a line of play that says that. There's also the consideration of you need to be wary of Sandstorm Titan, which, ooh, we see a turn coming down. We see the pickup the turn after, and this is what Unearthly, I think, was really trying to play around. He was really hoping that Hythar's reload was going to be a Sandstorm Titan, and that he would be able to silence and create this 2-turn clock. But now that we see Sandstorm Titan coming down right here, this is going to jam the board up in a very bad way for Unearthly. Even more so with the health gain off the Combri Healer.
Yeah, Hythar's draws just kind of lined up exactly correctly to beat Unearthly's draws and his plan.
Yeah, and depending on what Hythar can cobble together, I mean, this is going to be very, very troublesome for Unearthly to deal with. I mean, currently there is at least you can still just bounce the Champion of Glory that's buffed up with the Sandstorm Titan, and there's even the possibility of a triple block if you prefer to take care of the Champion Glory once and for all. Meanwhile, Unearthly just completely bricking out here, hitting just power after power, and that is not where you want to be. And Hythar is now going to absolutely go off, gaining 3 power and 3 cards off of this single power he just played.
Yeah, and now has a Scorpion Wasp and a Combri Healer. I think that Hythar sort of has all options covered at this point.
Yeah, 2 power and 2 cards, my mistake. One of the Martial Iron Thorns was in fact silenced, but it's almost irrelevant at this point. And picking up the extra Combri Healer is just icing on the cake at this point. Hythar can just go ahead and commit that and make sure that he never dies here. And really, Unearthly is in an almost no-win situation at this point. Yeah, certainly with all the power he picked up. Unearthly reasonably frustrated drawing 10 power in the Rakano deck. Needed answers a lot earlier than this. And meanwhile, Hythar is just going to get the Seraph rolling and start throwing silences down. And eventually he will start beating down with this board once he feels like it.
Yeah, I think he can probably start beating down at this point with the backup Wasp, Marshall, and Combri Healer. There's just no way that he's going to die from this point. Even Deep Forge Plate is not nearly good enough from Unearthly.
Yeah, it really just is not. Unearthly figuring out how to block here. Looks like he's just going to chump and take 10, and that's just going to be it. Unearthly has no real catch-up mechanic here. There's no single card he's going to draw that's going to be able to handle this board. Deep Forge Plate was not terrible, but unfortunately, I mean, if you just look at the amount of units and the amount of damage on the board, Unearthly clearly realizes that so many of these units are going to crash with his face. He had to have a Silverwing Familiar here to regain the life, but without having that kind of a life swing, it's just not going to matter. Yeah.
Yep. This so Unearthly is going to make his exit from the tournament here. To play the winner of Love Up and Paradox.
Yeah. So Hythar will be playing the winner of Love Up and Paradox. Congratulations to him. He is one of 2 big Combri players surviving still in the tournament. Unfortunately, we will have to say goodbye to Unearthly for the time being, but he will take a nice top 6 finish, which will get him $15 and 4 series points. So very, very likely that we will be seeing Unearthly back at the midseason major. In fact, almost guaranteed, I believe, based on his series point. So
Yeah,
for the time being,
actually the #1 seed.
Yeah, for the time being, we unfortunately will have to say a goodbye to Unearthly, but only for a couple weeks. He will certainly be back in our next high-profile tournament.
Yeah, so we are going to be showing the next match of Love Up versus Paradox shortly. We're going to take a brief break, so stay tuned, everyone.